And welcome along to Saturday Lifestyle with Dave. Today on the program we're going to look at thinking before you speak with Australians unintentionally offending people. We have, of course, the Paralympic Games on at the moment, and I'm absolutely blown away by the wonderful performances we've seen by the Australian team so far, and with another week or so to go, it's going to be another opportunity for us to continue the gold rush in Tokyo. But at the same time, we don't want to offend anyone, and River Knight's joining us. River, we caught up with you a little bit earlier in the week. Great to be finishing on this Saturday, having a look at research that suggests as many as 1 in 2 Aussies have used an offensive term to describe a person living with a disability. Is it because we don't know any better?
A lot of it's just not being aware or not being sure. So not a lot of that we look at is intentional, but it's just about people sort of feeling like they're walking on eggshells because some people just aren't comfortable or don't have that I guess experience of being able to have a relationship with someone with a disability, not realising that there's so many people in our community that experience disability, and it's not very difficult to find someone in your own family circle even that you can even talk to.
I would imagine it's pretty important to use the appropriate technology.
It is, and the research that Developing Australian Communities has recently done found that, like you're saying, half of people we surveyed had an experience where they'd used a word that describes disability as an insult or a rude way of talking to someone. And we found that about 18% reported just feeling completely lost in terms of how they talk about disability and how they approach that if they've got someone that they want to talk to. But we did find generationally it was a lot different. So the Generation Z, the ones coming out of school, 75% of them reported feeling pretty comfortable in that space, and maybe that's about education. Maybe there's more of a focus on that at school with such a diverse population of students. But we found it was interesting, and it does take time to learn that sort of stuff as we change and generations go from generation to generation.
Most of our Tasmanian schools are completely inclusive when it comes to disability, and a lot of kids sitting side by side with students that do have disabilities, and therefore, I suppose, to a certain extent, they become their friends and they learn how to communicate.
They do, and once you have that experience, that's what makes it easier to talk about and I guess communicate about this sort of stuff. Because what we want to do is make sure that we're not communicating and talking in a way that devalues people. So like recently I went to a shopping centre with a friend of mine. He uses a very large wheelchair with a big chin control, and he doesn't have a lot of movement in his arms and legs. It's a very large wheelchair. And I had a lady come up to me, ignore him, and went into the spiel of saying, "You're a wonderful human being. It's so beautiful that you're here letting him have lunch and spending time with him. You're such a wonderful man." And of course, he's rolling his eyes. And she said, "Look, does he know how to talk?" And I looked at him and I said, "I don't know." I said, "Do you know how to talk?" And he said, Nah, sorry. I don't know how to talk." And I just said, "Look, he says he can't talk." And she kind of looked at us and had a bit of a chuckle. And he said, "What are you calling him beautiful for? He's not beautiful. I would definitely not use that word to describe this guy as beautiful." And I just sort of laughed. I was like, "Hang on." And then they had a chat, and and I kind of stepped back a little bit. And they both had a chat. And after about a minute, instead of being awkward, she realised she was just talking to a person. And that's what we want to see more of.
So what sort of advice would you give people who want to be conscious that they are not offending people in the way they're speaking?
So we start with a person in general. So we sort of say a person with a disability. We don't use things like wheelchair bound or bed bound. It's a person who uses the wheelchair. So start with that person's first approach. It's a lot more respectful, but less is more. So don't worry about trying to sound intellectual and smart by using fancy terms. It's just simply a person, and yes, they may need some support with walking. Maybe they've got an intellectual disability, maybe they have autism. But even in the disability sector, it's still not that easy, because even in the disability sector ourselves, some people say, "Don't talk about me as being a person with autism. I'm not carrying autism in a backpack. I'm autistic. I want you to use that word." So we just say to people, you know what, if it needs to be brought up, have the conversation and just be upfront and say, "You know what, I've got no idea what I'm supposed to say. I'm a bit uncomfortable here because I'm worried I'm going to say the wrong thing. What should I say?" Let people have control over that and tell you what they're comfortable with.
And how can we find out a little bit more on making sure that we are doing the right thing? Because I think, generally speaking, most people don't like to offend anybody.
No, and it's about just looking around your personal circle and seeing that there are people in the community with disabilities. I can guarantee every family has someone not too far removed that is experiencing disability. We've got half of the people over 65 are living with a disability, and 15% of our population around the world have a disability. And that We the 15 movement coming out of the Paralympics has been wonderful, showcasing that sort of stuff. But we just sort of say, go to some of those spaces where you can meet people that are part of your family and your close network, have the conversation, but also, check out our websites. We've got dacommunities.com, and we share a lot of information on there around this sort of work that we're doing in the sector all over Australia. And they can also check us out on Facebook if they want to look up Developing Australian Communities.
It's a very important space, River. We thank you for sharing it with our listeners today on the program.
No worries. Thanks for having me.